Je vous propose de passer au point 5 de...
And I suggest we move on to item 5, because we have experts to hear on the issue of secure medical supply chain. Now, I should like, unfortunately, the sound left us for a minute. So maybe the theme has not brought about a draft resolution on the part of the Parliamentary Assembly so far, but we felt that in the context of COVID-19, securing a medical supply chain is paramount. So first, I shall give the floor to Mr. Ramos, Chair of the committee. Luis, over to you.
Le président n'est pas là pour...
Mr. Lady Ramos is here. Mr. Lady Ramos, could you request the floor, please?
On peut revenir.
Maybe we'd come back to this later. And here he is. I understand he's here. That is good news. Yes, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Good afternoon, all. And I must say it's a pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon. And it's an honor to address you as a chair of the Committee on Social Matters, Health and Sustainable Development of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on an important issue, securing a safe medical supply chain. Now, our committee looks into matters, amongst others, related to public health and sustainable development, including access to health services that are adequate and affordable, and the efficient management of risks and opportunities in public health. The pandemic has stressed the need to look at the weaknesses of supply chains of medical products throughout the world. As we have learned from the crisis this spring, to be too dependent on a country or region, be it Europe or elsewhere, can make the supply chains more vulnerable to disruption. Our report, lessons drawn for the future from an efficient response based on rights by Mr. Andres Junco has already been adopted by the Assembly, and you'll find it on our website. The pandemic has had an unprecedented impact on the market conditions of supply, in particular facial masks, respirators, and medical protection equipment. And supply has been overtaken by demand, and there were also some worries regarding falsification. Our committee published a brochure on Q&As on the MEDICRIME Convention. Yes, we have a slight technical issue. Could you come back to floor on your screen? I am on screen.
More speech?
Do you want me to backpedal? No, we can hear you. Yes, you can continue. It's working now. Well, shall I pick up where I left off? Yes, just pick up where you left off, please. So, our committee, as I was saying, published an information brochure with Q&As on the MEDICRIME Convention, together with the expert, Dr. Ilse Feisthans, and I would like to use this opportunity to call upon the states to sign and ratify the convention in order to strengthen its power to fight against falsified medical products. If you have any questions on the reasons why you should do this, the brochure will probably give you the answers. It is our public health priority to strengthen supply chains of medical products to guarantee uninterrupted supply of essential medicines and other medical products, such as protection equipment we mentioned earlier, which is safe and in keeping with quality standards and good for the health. It is essential that we should collaborate and show solidarity in Europe and throughout the world. I am very happy to open this hearing of the subcommittee and like to thank the speakers for being here today to share their expertise. I wish you a fruitful session and I will stay with you throughout. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I, too, should like to thank the speakers for being with us today online to discuss this very important subject, medical supply chains. There are many lessons to be drawn from the COVID-19 pandemic regarding the resilience of our system in times of crisis and lack of supply, which might be a recurring fact. It's a phenomenon which is very often underestimated in public debates. For instance, in 2017, there was a disruption in major therapeutic medicines, 179 days waiting, just to illustrate the depth of the problem. And if you look at antibiotics and vaccines and the central nervous system, such as diseases such as Parkinson's disease, our pharmaceutical industry at European level seems to be lagging behind. Before the pandemic, according to the European Medicine Agency, about 40% of products in the EU came from third countries, and 80% of manufacturers of substances are outside Europe, mainly in China and India. So it is a real problem, and this is what we'll be discussing with the presentations given by Ms. Nathalie Collin-Osterlé from the EU Parliament, Mr. Thomas Sendervik, Director General of the Danish Medicine Agency, and Ms. Susanne Kiel, Director of the European Directorate for the Quality of Medicines. And then we'll be hearing Mr. Sergey from the Russian Federation, Chair of the Committee of Parties to the Convention MEDICRIME, and Mr. Alal Amawi, Partner for Democracy at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. We'll be talking about the Medicare Convention and its contribution to securing supply chains. This convention, which has been active since January 2016, and makes it possible to fight the phenomenon of falsified products through multilateral cooperation. So I now give the floor to our experts. Ms. Nathalie Collin-Osterlé, it is your turn. Yes, I hope you can see me. Yes, Madam. Good afternoon, all. First of all, I'm delighted to be here today. There's a lot of echo, says the speaker. Yes, we can hear you, but there is an echo indeed. I can hear you well. The echo is a bit of a problem with the echo. Yes, I drafted a report on the lack of medicines within the European Union. This is a national competency, but Article 68 on the working of the European Union, it states that the EU is to coordinate and top up national efforts in order to offer European citizens a proper healthcare policy. The interpreter has to point out the sound is very difficult to use. There are multiple causes for these issues. Of course, the localization of production, which is one of the main causes, and we also have manufacturing problems. And then there is the very strong demand, as was the case during the pandemic crisis. And then we also have the massification of demand and compression of prices, which led to concentration. So for a number of products, we only have 2 or 3 suppliers in Asia. So if there is the slightest manufacturing problem or any issue with a supply, the supply can't be taken over by others. Now, in the there's the short, the medium, and the long term. In the short term, I think the current system should be kept up. The civil protection emergency provision, which was extended to medical emergencies. The sound has now totally disappeared, unfortunately.
Stratégiques, c'est-à-dire ceux pour lesquels une rupture va entraîner un risque.
So we have to focus on immediate danger to patients who have no other alternative medical solution. So we need a common basket of medicines and vaccines, which are priority substances. Then, in the supply procedures, there has to be a priority which isn't price. At the European level, we call for the greatest possible transparency regarding supply chains, but also the inventories, because there has been overstocking. So what we suggest is that the European agency becomes the regulatory authority regarding inventory management in order to anticipate any tension and to regulate the stocks from the producer all the way to the distributor, so that public health makes legitimate, for instance, to act upon companies, for instance, which work just in time with the risk that there is a disruption in supply. And then legislation must be modified in order to facilitate circulation between member states with different types of packaging, also extended use by dates in times of crisis. And then the relocation authorizing state aid for those industries that produce in Europe and establish a map map of the potential sites within the European Union. Another measure would be the setting up of one or several European pharmaceutical bodies, non-profit, producing the health and strategic critical products where there is a fragility of the supply chain and medicines which are essential but no longer bring in benefits for the manufacturers. So a system by which results are shared, research is mutualized, is pooled. So to conclude, we need to relocate, we need to harmonize, we need to strengthen cooperation between member states with greater solidarity to regain our sovereignty and a true industrial strategy for pharmaceutical products.
Je vous prie de m'excuser, j'ai eu un petit bug et j'ai été déconnectée pendant un petit instant de l'audition. Je suis désolée, Madame Osterley, merci en tout cas pour toute la première partie de vos propos que j'ai parfaitement entendu. C'était extrêmement intéressant. Je suis vraiment confuse de ce petit incident technique. J'invite...
Very sorry for this little technical problem that cut off the mic. Now we give the floor to the next expert, Dr. Thomas Senderowitz, Director General of Danish Medicines Agency.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very well and see you as well.
All right. Thank you. Honored members of the subcommittee, ladies and gentlemen, public and animal health protection depends on continuous strengthening of supply security, both to ensure presence and continuity of supply of the high-quality medicinal products that European citizens expect.
Excuse me, Mr. Senderowitz.
Products and technologies, while ensuring that their manufacture is carried out and supervised to an appropriate standard.
Sorry.
Given the number of actors involved, effective communication and engagement with stakeholders at all levels of the supply chain is essential.
Herr Senderowitz,
supply chain of medicinal products throughout the product life cycle,
kan du lyssna på mig?
to commercial production, is global.
Excusez-nous pour cette...
Very sorry for this technical problem. We have some trouble with the sound. We're trying to solve the sound issues. When you speak, could you please press on the button to the left, which indicates floor? It might sound surprising, but that's what you need to do. So could you press on the button floor? Mr. Senderowitz, can you again send in your request to speak? And then press on floor.
Monsieur Senderowitz a été déconnecté.
Mr. Senderowitz has been disconnected. We are trying to reestablish links with Mr. Senderowitz, so he's back again. We'll give him the floor now.
At which point in time did you leave me?
Est-ce que vous pourriez appuyer?
Can you please press on the button to the bottom to the right, which says floor, where you change languages. Oh, sorry, to the left. The bottom left of your screen, you should have a button called floor. Can you please press on floor? Yes. Right. Is the sound any better? So have you pressed on the button floor? Okay, now you can speak. You can speak now. You can continue. Sorry for this technical problem.
Where did you lose me? Do I have to restart all over again?
I think it would be good to start again. We had a lot of echo and it didn't work well. So can you start from again? Yes, please.
Public and animal health protection depends on a continuous strengthening of supply chain security, both to ensure presence and continuity of supply of the high-quality medical products that EU citizens expect, and to permit the entry of new products and technologies while ensuring that their manufacture is carried out and supervised to an appropriate standard. A lot of actors are involved in giving this high number effective communication, and engagement with stakeholders at all levels of the supply chain is essential to achieve this. Today's supply chain of medicinal product throughout the product life cycle, from development through to commercial production, is of global nature, and it's increasingly complex. Active substances may be manufactured outside the EU, in, for instance, China or India. Further formulate European collaboration even more necessary. No single country can manage supply chain challenges by themselves, nor are all solutions to these challenges of local nature. The current pandemic has further amplified the need for European collaboration when it comes to ensuring supply of critical medicines to our citizens. Globalized supply chains and markets underline the need for extended supervisory oversight of these supply chains, especially active substance manufacturing, through international cooperation and collaboration based on new initiatives and existing ones, such as the EDQM, the European Directorate for the Quality of Medicines. We will hear from the director in a moment. The potential for presence of falsified medicines in the supply chain has also been amplified by the globalization, and leading to a substantial increase in reports in various countries in recent years. Disruption in pharmaceutical supply chains poses risks to the continuity of supply and availability of medicinal products. The COVID-19 crisis has illustrated that being dependent only on production located in specific spots might pose a risk to continuity of supply. Examples include shortages of intensive care unit medicines and in the painkiller paracetamol, but others have been observed as well. It seems likely that Europe will remain dependent on India and China as a major source of generic medicines, biosimilars, and active pharmaceutical ingredients, so-called APIs. In addition, there are indications that even more third countries, for instance Ethiopia, could become players in the supply chain. Medicinal products such as antibiotics and vaccines are increasingly manufactured outside the EU. Longer supply chains and supply chains relying on a single or limited source manufacturing and so-called just-in-time production remain vulnerable to disruption. Older niche products that remain important to public health may be vulnerable to commercial pressure that impact availability. And there will be a need to explore possibilities to increase the European and the EU strategic autonomy in the field of supply of critical medicines. Repurposing of authorized medicinal products might entail their scarcity for the authorized indications. On the other hand, new treatments to fight epidemics, especially promising new medicines, might not be promptly available to all patients or on an equal basis across different European regions. There may be future developments in the regulatory framework encouraging supply chain resilience to ensure continuity of supply and availability of medicinal products through measures which favor the manufacturing inside the European Union or inside Europe in order to decrease the dependency on third countries and promote diversity of suppliers and contribute to the strategic autonomy, as I mentioned. In the European regulatory network, that is the European Medicines Agency and the EU national competent authorities, we intend to focus on 5 main areas in this aspect in our new and imminent arriving network strategy. 1. Enhance traceability, oversight and security in the human and veterinary medicine supply chain from manufacturing to importation and final use of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Enhancing linkages in medicinal product and supply chain information will be crucial in order to have necessary information available for all regulators. This is key for both human and veterinary medicine. 2. Enhance inspector capacity building at the EU and international level to address the problem of APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, new technologies, and continuous manufacturing. 3. Reinforce the responsibility for product quality by harmonizing and reinforcing guidance to facilitate a coherent approach to the standards by regulators and industries. 4. Encourage supply chain resilience and review long-term risks resulting from dependency on limited number of manufacturers and sites to ensure continuity in supply and availability of medicinal products. And 5, analyze the possible implications of new manufacturing technologies in order to regulate the new supply chains needed to manufacture and distribute new types of medicinal products for human and veterinary use. The unexpected presence of N-nitrosamine impurities, which you may have heard of, in some medicinal products, including the blood pressure-lowering medicine angiotensin II receptor blockers, and other products subsequently identified, has raised concerns about the quality of medicines and the controls applied by the API manufacturers, the finished product manufacturers, and marketing authorization holders. The lessons learned from the nitrosamine incident may lead to more tailored supervision of API manufacturers throughout assessment and inspection of the API development and risk management practices and technology transfer. There is an opportunity to increase routine inspections within the current framework, especially for pre-approval inspections of such API facilities, and in the context of the implementation of mutual recognition agreements, for instance, the one between EU and US. The current regulatory framework establishes a basis to reinforce the responsibilities for product quality and conduct of the actors within the supply chain. Some of the regulatory activities remain fragmented across the EU. For instance, how good distribution practice, GDP activities, are authorized and supervised locally. There should be consistent and comprehensive implementation of the current GDP principles in all member states within the EU, and ideally also in European countries not in the EU, to ensure the integrity of the supply chain. In addition, there should be a review of current European GDP guidelines for human medicines and APIs to establish if they remain sufficient to regulate the complex distribution channels in Europe. The harmonization of GDP guidance would facilitate a coherent approach to the standards and implementation of resource-effective inspection programs. Even though GMP activities, that is good manufacturing process activities, are harmonized, the GMP guidance may also require work in some areas, especially in the areas of medicinal gases, blood-derived products, and 3D printing of small molecules. We advocate, the European Regulatory Network regulators advocate for further developments in GMP and quality guidelines aimed at marketing authorization holders and reflecting on the importance of thorough development studies and of process and product knowledge, and that manufacturers should ensure implementation of advanced quality management systems. This includes increased strengthening oversight of the entire supply chain and extending to the development phases, including clinical and non-clinical testing. Asking for inclusion of risk assessment evaluations from the manufacturers of API and finished products in the application for marketing authorization regarding the supply capacity and their respective measures for mitigation of any potential disruption would strengthen supply chain resilience. So this is demanding actually the manufacturers of having plans in place of how they will act if there are problems in supply. And such a risk assessment should include whether to produce the active substance and starting materials in general from different sources and various regions of the world. So as you also pointed out, Jennifer de Temmerman, we cannot only rely on one or few manufacturers for critical medicines. The COVID-19 pandemic has also highlighted that the repurposing of already authorized medicinal products to treat a new disease can undermine the market availability of such products for their authorized indications. So, in conclusion, European collaboration is absolutely key in order to ensure the future availability and supply of critical medicinal products to our citizens. This includes increased and improved oversight and a close look of how we build a future stronger European strategic autonomy when it comes to this supply. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Monsieur Sanderovitz. Je vais laisser la parole à la troisième intervenante de ce panel, puis ensuite nous pourrons échanger entre nous et j'ouvrirai la parole aux membres de la commission. Donc, notre dernière intervenante sur cette première partie est Madame Suzanne Kettel de la Direction européenne de la qualité du médicament et des soins de santé. Bonjour à Madame Kettel. La parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak at this important meeting. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you today what contributions the EDQM has made to securing medical supply chains during the COVID-19 pandemic and our vision for avoiding shortages in the future. This pandemic has caused enormous harm to people's health, jobs and well-being. The virus, known as SARS-CoV-2, and the disease it causes, COVID-19, spread rapidly throughout the world, affecting over 190 countries, and more than 35 million cases have been confirmed since the beginning of the year. It is almost easy to forget that just 8 months ago, the virus that is causing the COVID-19 pandemic was unknown to the majority of scientists. The strict lockdowns brought in by most governments to stop the spread of the virus and limit the death toll have hopefully come to an end, but many questions remain unanswered, including that of securing medical supply chains. Medicine shortages happen regularly, and the reasons are, as we've already heard, multifactorial. Typically, a number of combined causes create situations during which the demand for a medicine cannot be met by an adequate supply. It is important to understand the underlying causes to make the supply chains more resilient. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of medicine shortages has increased dramatically. The causes of which are manifold, including lockdowns in countries supplying medicines or their components to Europe, generalized border closures, stockpiling by healthcare systems and citizens, and so on. On the 11th March, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak as a pandemic. Just 5 days later, on the 16th of March, the EDQM's business continuity plan to safeguard core activities was immediately kicked into gear. But why was our business continuity plan so important? As you know, the Convention on the Elaboration of a European Pharmacopoeia attempts at providing a legal and scientific basis to ensure the quality of medicines and their components in the form of a single reference work, the European Pharmacopoeia. The availability of and access for patients to quality medicines are more important than ever in the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic. And this is why the EDQM has been working extremely hard to ensure the continued supply of its goods and services, and is engaging with all stakeholders, including national, European and international authorities, to help protect public health. Now, the European Pharmacopoeia consists of documentary standards describing the tests to ensure the quality of medicines. But most of the monographs require the use of reference standards. These are physical materials to perform these tests, which means that manufacturers need them to be able to release batches of medicines to the market. And I'm pleased to say that during lockdown, the EDQM supply of reference standards continued uninterrupted, and our overall portfolio covers more than 3,000 different standards. Now, while shipping and travel restrictions did cause some delays, the reference standard supply chain remained unbroken. Indeed, more than 10,000 deliveries of reference standards took place between mid-March and mid-June, and almost 12,000 orders for reference standards were processed during the same period, thus supporting the continued supply of quality medicines. In addition, the European Pharmacopoeia Online and the EDQM's public consultation platform, Pharm Europa, as well as other databases and documentary resources functioned as normal and remained fully accessible to users. They were also continuously updated and maintained during the entire period. A specific COVID-19 webpage went live in the beginning of April, which provided stakeholders with targeted information relevant in the context of the pandemic. For example, compilation of texts on antiviral medicines and, since early July, on vaccines. As soon as a generalized lockdown was announced, the EDQM entered into a structured dialogue with other pharmacopoeias, with the pharmaceutical industry and other stakeholders, recognizing that a coordinated multilateral approach is crucial given the complexity of the supply chains. During regular video conferences with the International Meeting of World Pharmacopoeias, we discussed best practices and approaches during the pandemic, and also used the Pharmacopoeia alert system created in 2018 to facilitate a coordinated response of pharmacopoeias around the world to a health crisis. In addition, to ensure we were keeping our finger on the pulse of the latest developments in the pharmaceutical industry, we started organizing regular exchanges with industry associations, in addition to what we normally do bilaterally on an annual basis. The past months have shown that our exchanges provide useful information to both sides, and we are currently discussing different options on how to maintain the exchange once the pandemic is behind us. One of the topics we discussed at these meetings was a fast-track procedure that we put in place within our certification of suitability to the monographs of the European Pharmacopoeia, our SEP procedure, which was much appreciated by the industry. The EDQM issues SEPs, which attest that the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs, in a medicine can be suitably controlled by the quality requirements set out in the European Pharmacopoeia. Our fast-track approach helped speed up the assessment and the granting of new SEPs and the revision of existing ones for substances of particular importance in the COVID-19 setting, and this contributed to increasing the volume available on the market. Now, already in March, the EDQM started monitoring the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the supply of APIs to Europe. We adjusted our production schedules according to the changed demand to ensure sufficient stocks of reference standards for critical APIs. At the same time, we were able to quickly identify when distribution activities increased again at the end of the Chinese lockdown. That is to say, we knew that production and manufacturing had started again in China. This information was essential for market supply, and we, of course, fed back to our partners immediately. These different activities show that in the short and midterm, supply chains can be made more resilient through a coordinated approach between stakeholders. However, in the mid to long term, a diversification of API production across different global regions is a critical factor to increase the resilience of supply chains. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a little-known fact to the general public that the majority of APIs used in medicines for the European market are produced in countries outside of Europe and the United States, although this is a situation we have been facing for more than a decade. Just to provide one example, the last production site for paracetamol in Europe, located in France, discontinued their production in 2008. Ever since then, all the paracetamol on the European market comes from countries outside Europe. The pandemic has highlighted the fragility of such a system, and since then there has been much debate about bringing API production back to Europe. However, bringing back the production of APIs to Europe is a very complex matter that will have a significant impact on the cost of medicines and hence of healthcare systems, as a move of production to outside Europe has mainly economic reasons. It may also not be the solution to our current problems on its own. The EU continues to examine different levers, and we've heard about them, and options around shortages and the production of APIs in Europe. In addition, at the Council of Europe, we need to think beyond the European Union, as our membership is much larger. Our joint actions, the joint actions of governments, of international organizations, and of individual citizens are crucial. The sharing of information and competencies Convergence and work sharing, international collaboration, and the elaboration of common approaches are essential for our collective approach of protecting public health. As a result, the EDQM very much supports numerous key international organizations striving to advance on the issue of medical supply chains. For example, the European Commission's Pharmaceutical Strategy for Europe aims to create a regulatory framework and to support the industry in promoting research and technologies that reach patients and fulfill their therapeutic needs while addressing market failures. The European Medicines Agency proactively gathers information from the EU member states to monitor or anticipate shortages at a European level. We are also working very closely with the World Health Organization, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the heads of medicines agencies and professional associations. To conclude, there is no doubt that this crisis will leave some long-lasting scars on our society, and the return to business as usual to pre-pandemic levels will take time, if it ever happens. People are looking for answers. However, science is a rigorous process, and finding the answers takes time. Doctors, scientists, and researchers are working around the clock to unravel the mysteries about the novel coronavirus, and every day brings new information about the virus and ways to develop treatments and vaccines to protect against it. Here at the EDQM, our priority and first duty is to serve public health. And I'm extremely proud of the role the EDQM is playing in supporting scientists, public health authorities, manufacturers and researchers in ensuring the availability of essential medicines that we need on a daily basis. Only through international collaboration, cooperation, and multilateralism can solutions be found. This virus knows no borders, and as a result can only be tackled with the same borderless approach. The world needs a global response to protect citizens' health over the world, and reverting to nationalism and isolated national actions is not a solution and may even aggravate the current situation. It is only through international cooperation that we will be able to tackle the challenges which lie ahead. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Kittel, for your contribution. We come to the end of the first part of exchanges, which allowed us to understand all the complexities linked to supply chain security and the difficulties that we have, and also solutions that may exist. We see that some actions have been adopted, but we need to find common and shared solutions as well. And I'm going to give the floor to those who would like to ask questions or react to the contributions we've just heard.
Je donne la parole à M. Senderovitz.
Yes, I don't have too much comments. I'm also ready for answering questions if there are any from the room. Actually, that's why I requested. So I don't know how it works. Do I have to ask for the floor, or do I only ask for the floor if I have to answer a question?
Oui, alors en fait, dans un premier temps, je vais prendre.
Well, first I'm going to collect all the questions, and then when you want to answer the question, you can ask the floor. So I'm going to give the floor to the person who wants to ask a question.
Bien, vous pouvez activer votre son normalement.
Please switch on your microphone.
I believe you are all safe as we discuss the consequences of COVID today. Let me firstly greet the honorable members of the committee with due respect and agreement with the delivered presentations and contributions. I would like to share my perspective on this topic. None of us imagined that COVID-19 will hit us that hard. As a result, while a number of regions enjoyed the privilege of medical suppliers, others suffered from its shortage and increasing price. Yet making the medical supply chains inclusive and crisis resilient will not be enough if we neglect the discussions on its quality and safety. In this regard, I would like to propose a few policy frameworks to build up resilience against possible future crises by making the safe and quality medical supply chains more sustainable and inclusive for all. Increasing the regulatory cooperation with the trade partners as one of the priorities. I think doing so will assist us to import and purchase the products during the future crisis that meet the quality standards. Then secondly, releasing the medical supplies to the countries area with the most need at first, which is also very important. Doing so should stop the restrictions the countries put on each other based on the exports of medical facilities and products, and will ensure inclusivity. And finally, tracking the disruptive events in medical supply chain by building the data sets. Such kind of data sets and research will allow us to ship drugs, export restrictions of essential medicines, and manufacture difficulties caused by crisis or pandemic-related lockdowns. And at the end, I want to emphasize three keywords in my speech, which are multilateral cooperation, visibility, and trust. I believe that with the help of these three components, we can create a secure, safe, and quality global medical supply chain that will be pandemic and future crisis resilient. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci pour...
Well, thank you. Are there any further questions? I thought I saw Mr. Davis. No? Well, then we can move on to the second part of the hearing. But Ms. Nuruleva, you must disconnect now. Thank you. Right, if there are no further questions for now, we'll move on to the second part of the hearing. And I shall give the floor first to Mr. Sergei Lazarev of the Russian Federation, who chairs the Committee of Parties to the MEDICRIME Convention. Mr. Glagolev. Is Mr. Glagolev here? I see that he's trying to connect. Apparently there's a bit of a technical problem. We can still see Ms. Nurulayeva. Yes, we have a bit of a problem. Ms. Nurulayeva, maybe you can hand back the floor, if you would. There should be an icon you can click on. Yes, well, I think that worked. Mr. Glagolev is connecting. Very well. Good afternoon.
My camera does not work.
On vous voit très bien, monsieur.
Well, we can see you. We can see you.
Yes,
Yes, we can see you.
That's great. That's great. I'm very sorry for this technical issue. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you all for your online presence, and in particular, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe for inviting me to participate in these hearings on important and sometimes forgotten issue of the medical supply chains. The aim of my intervention today is to present a brief outline of our treaty, the MEDICRIME Convention, and its implications to securing the distribution chain without forgetting its significance in times of COVID-19 pandemic. It is obvious that public health is a key to enjoyment of every human rights, and consequently the primary goal of our treaty, opened for signature in Moscow in 2011, is to combat any threat to public health posed by falsified medicines and related crime through substantive criminal law measures. It goes without saying that Convention aspires to protect people from using falsified medicines. This goal is achieved through a principle of free peace. First, by prosecuting the falsification of medicines through substantive criminal law, then by protecting the right of victims, and then by promoting national and international cooperation. Currently, it is the only legally binding instrument countering falsified medical products, and therefore we shall be grateful for having such a unique treaty. With 18 parties from Europe, Asia, and Africa, and very soon America, it is a truly global convention. The convention covers a wide array of medical products, including medicines, medical devices, not forgetting about active pharmaceutical ingredients, parts and materials of medical devices, without regarding the status of their patent protection. The monitoring of the treaty is carried out by the Committee of the Parties, which I have the pleasure to chair, and it is focused mostly on expert assistance to the party in implementing the convention. The convention puts a particular emphasis on the promotion of multidisciplinary cooperation both at national and international levels. This provides for a fast exchange of information and coordination of activities between custom, regulatory authorities, and police. The topic on which we are currently working, the Committee of the Party, is to speed up such coordination and exchange of information among our parties. Certainly, special attention within our treaty is given to protection of legal supply chains. First of all, the Convention urges parties to take necessary legislative and practical measures to ensure the safe distribution of medical products. People assume that all medical products they buy are safe. But there are certain threats coming from the nature of distribution chains. First of all, this is their complexity, poor regulation sometimes of wholesalers, illicit distributors, non-legitimate internet sales and pharmacies, and multiple roles of import. So to be completely sure and to reduce the risks of the falsified medicines, the legal supply chains should be monitored. According to the MEDICRIME Convention, the falsification of medical products and similar crime refers not only to the manufacture or supply or trafficking of medical products, but also falsification of their packaging and accompanying documentation. Indeed, falsified medical products put under threat the health of millions of people, and therefore special focus should be given on their protection. First, by preventing from entering falsified products into legal supply chains, and then by rapidly reacting to the breach of the established protection of the distribution channels. In addition to that, the Convention establishes aggravating circumstances for perpetrator if the offense was committed by persons abusing their confidence placed to them as in force of their professional capacities as manufacturers or suppliers. The Convention thus provides support for national and regional initiatives aimed at protecting of legal supply channels. In particular, those envisaged in a falsified medicines directive of the European Union and new regulations of my country, Russia, where the trade systems for medicinal products became mandatory for all the products on the market since October this year. During the current pandemic, the Committee of the Parties observed a dramatic increase and change of patterns of crime related to medical products. In this regard, they felt a need to underline that the Convention was designed partly having in mind such crises. And today, in these circumstances, it remains indispensable and essential legal tool to protect human life and public health. So on April the 8th this year, the Committee of the Parties issued an advice, including 9 recommendations on the application of our treaty in times of COVID-19. This advice is translated currently in 6 languages and can be found on the website of the Committee of the Parties. First of all, it stresses that the protection of public health and individual rests not only with healthcare professionals and healthcare providers, but also with those who contribute to the protection of public health and legal supply chains from the crimes we struggle with. Alongside, despite the current lack of resources and the stress exercised on health care systems, parties were reminded to adhere to provisions of the treaty and to cooperate on criminal matters and to maintain the exchange of information and in the maximal possible extent. Notwithstanding the lockdowns, the Committee of the Parties stressed the need for sufficient staff at key points of the supply chains in order to disrupt a national and international flow of falsified medical products. This applies to customs, to post, and to control laboratories. Countries were also advised to secure legal supply chains and to prevent unauthorized diversion of the badly needed products into grey market. So these examples and this recommendation clearly demonstrate the relevance and importance of the MEDICRIME Convention in the present situation. It is obvious that we have no chance to act alone. We are facing the pandemic together, and international multidisciplinary cooperation shall be carried out to the maximal possible extent. I therefore call on the states to be both extremely vigilant against falsified medical products and similar crime, and to ratify MEDICRIME Convention, because together we are stronger. The last but not least, I would like to reiterate that the Committee of the Parties fully counts on the genuine and strong support of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in bringing as many states as possible to the family of the MEDICRIME Convention. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Monsieur Glagolek, pour votre intervention.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, it is important to recall the work of the MEDICRIME Convention, and the member states of the Council of Europe are encouraged to ratify the convention in order for us to act together on this matter. Now we have our last speaker, Mr. Alal Amraoui, Partner for Democracy, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So maybe you could request the floor, sir, in order for you to be able to speak.
Un petit souci de connexion.
Slight problem with connection.
Ouais, la connexion n'est pas très bonne a priori, donc.
Apparently the connection isn't very good, so unfortunately we have to wait a few moments.
Oui. Monsieur Amraoui, si vous...
Mr. Amraoui, if you can hear us, can you check that you're on Google Chrome? Because it's the only browser that works with Qdo. Sorry, we're having a bit of trouble getting into contact with Mr. Amraoui, and the connection isn't very good.
Visiblement, il indique qu'il est bien sur Google.
Well, apparently, as he tells us, he is on Google Chrome.
Monsieur Amraoui,
Mr. Amraoui, we see that you probably hear us, but unfortunately the connection isn't good enough for us to be receiving the images.
ouais. On peut peut-être ouvrir la...
Well, maybe we could start the debate, the discussion with the other speakers. Yes, if we can't connect to Mr. Amraoui, we'll see if we can maybe later. And I shall now give the floor to the participants. They might have questions on the MEDICRIME convention, questions to Mr. Glagolev. So I'm just reminding you, you've got an icon there in order to request the floor, so don't hesitate while we try and solve the connection problems with Mr. Amraoui. Nobody seems to be requesting the floor. How do we stand with Mr. Amraoui? It doesn't seem to be working, in spite of our efforts. And there are no further questions either, from what I see.
Ah, parfait. Bienvenue, bonjour.
Welcome, welcome. Yes, we had some technical problems there. Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you for your patience and for your invitation, because the topic has come to the forefront, as you have all stressed. The MEDICRIME Convention is the only instrument, international legal instrument today fighting counterfeiting and the falsification of medical products. It has made it possible to make to these misdemeanors criminal offences, and it calls on the guarantee of protection of the victims and allowing their access to relevant information, as well as allowing facilitation of the prevention. This convention is more topical than ever within the framework of the pandemic, which is probably the worst for several decades. And this period indeed also brings about all types of trafficking, such as the sale of falsified medical products, be they medicines or medical devices, protective masks, or fast screening tests. The counterfeiting of medicines and medical equipment is a fact, but more so in a period of crisis, and it is a true risk for those who use these products. So they are threats to public health. So it's a health emergency situation, a humanitarian disaster before our eyes, and the international community remains indifferent or is not even aware of it. Now, if you take the example of masks, if they do not meet standards, those who use them might believe they are protected and are not. They could be contaminated or contaminate other people. Same thing for the falsified test kits. And all products are involved: antibiotics, contraceptive, anti-tetanus serums, cancer treatment, insulin, etc. The phenomenon is growing and has taken on alarming proportions, and this throughout the whole world. The means used vary, but internet is right up there. 1 in every 2 medicines sold on the internet is falsified. And this is a disaster which affects Africa mainly. According to WHO, 42% of counterfeit medicines produced worldwide are used in Africa, and it's very lucrative. It is estimated that every time traffickers invest $1,000 in counterfeit medicines, this can bring about $450,000 in profit. This is a margin of 10 to 25 times greater than for drug dealers. false medicines are used mainly amongst the poorest people. A study in 2015 estimated that in sub-Saharan Africa, 122,000 children under 5 had died within a year because of anti-malarial drugs which were falsified or bad quality. And there is always the issue of chloroquine and self-medication to treat the COVID-19 disease. We must therefore measure the threat related to the use of falsified products. And since people do not know what they are taking and they don't know what the right doses is, these falsified medicines contribute to the increase in resistance to antimicrobial products. Now, most of these counterfeit medicines come from a certain number of Asian countries, and in some African countries, the distribution circuits, unfortunately, aren't really well monitored, and all the medicines aren't sold in pharmacies, but in souks, for instance, and not all countries have rigorous regulations, and many do not have laboratories to control and analyze the products. Therefore, Africa is definitely a good hunting ground for the traffickers. Morocco was one of the first to join the MEDICRIME Convention. Unlike other countries, the sale of medicines on internet is strictly forbidden in Morocco. So for now, Morocco isn't affected by counterfeit. There is, however, a growing traffic in medicines which are bought in neighboring countries and then sold out in Moroccan souks in border towns. And Moroccans buy these medicines thinking that they might be better than those sold in the pharmacies because they come from abroad. And above all, there is the very attractive price of these products. So this brings in an enormous amount of money. Morocco has a laboratory several times certified by the European Quality Director. Morocco is part of the Europe zone in terms of the quality of its of the medicines produced locally. We are aware that we are not free of risk of counterfeit medications. There is no zero risk. The main danger is that Morocco, because of its geostrategic position, might become a platform for counterfeit products going to Europe or countries to the south. Morocco has a certain number of assets to bring to partnerships between African countries. And there's a resolution bringing together several African countries, Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, exists to strengthen the effort in terms of the fight against counterfeit medicine and harmonizing regulations at African level. The threat is worldwide. International cooperation is paramount. And that is in the spirit of the MEDICRIME Convention. These efforts at international level very often flounder in the field because it is not enough to ratify a convention, but you have to have the necessary political will to implement it. And in spite of improvement of national legislations, the health systems in African states still find it difficult to protect their citizens against illicit medicines. And these massive gains derived from counterfeit are not counterbalanced by a risk as such, because even when the traffickers are arrested in sub-Saharan Africa, very often they don't even go to prison and simply pay a fine and go back to their business. There are hundreds of thousands of victims every year, and many, many children are concerned. And the trafficking is growing and spreading. So it is necessary to act, because this trafficking uses the same channel as organized crime and the trafficking of illicit drugs and weapons and terrorism as well, with many victims in Africa, but also worldwide. Thank you.
Pour votre intervention.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Do you have any question on the part of participants and observers? I'll give you a few minutes to react if you want to speak. If you want to speak, you have to just click on the little icon, or else I will give the floor to the experts who would like to add comments or who might want to draw some conclusions. If any of you would like to speak, you can please send in your request for speaking.
Bien. En tout cas, moi, j'ai réagi aux chiffres que vous avez donnés.
I'm going to react to figures that you have given about the number of children. It's 122,000 children. It's a very high figure, very shocking. It shows the phenomenon and the importance of MEDICRIME convention. If nobody's asking for the floor, then I'll conclude this session by saying that we have looked at all the difficulties and the complexities involved in the issues we have talked about, and I will say that there are no simple situation or one single situation in this context of COVID. As you can see, generally speaking, it's important to cooperate at multilateral level. And we can't just hope to find a solution at the national level and not think that borders will stop us from finding a solution. We have talked about relocating activities. Each country might want to have its own production, but we need to coordinate the production of active substances in different regions of the world. So we need to develop multilateralism, promote research, exchange good practices, and work on new developments. And then what was said in the last part of the hearing is to reinforce verification and security. We've talked about masks and tests, and it is important that a maximum of countries sign up to the convention MEDICRIME so that we can coordinate our efforts to fight against all these negative phenomena. Thank you to everybody, all those who speak, all those who spoke, all the experts who took the floor today. Thank you, everybody. Now, item 6 under miscellaneous. We have no subject here unless somebody has sent a point under this item 6. Otherwise, item 7, dates and place of the next meeting. Now, it is a bit difficult to plan a meeting of this committee. So the moment we get back to more or less a normal situation, we'll contact you. Thank you very much for your attention or for staying with us in spite of the technical problems. I would like to thank the interpreters for their precious help. Thank you again to all the experts, and thank you to all those who have followed us. Thank you to the President of the committee for being here, Mr. Laite Ramos, and for having contributed to organizing this hearing. I hope to see you very soon in good health, obviously. Thank you very much.